Episode 25 of the Consistency Podcast is here. My name's Stephen Gloucester, and there's a lot to get to this episode. First, let's discuss episode 2 of the Unnamed Podcast. This episode was a huge improvement over week 1, and I give it an A- overall. It was really well done. This was a bounce-back episode for Portnoy, who definitely seemed reinvigorated. He was on point, he was funny, and he didn't hold back his feelings or honesty about a bunch of topics. And that's what I love about Dave. His insight, especially to the DraftKings deal, was something most CEOs do not discuss. And that is so refreshing when Dave lets you in on some of the behind-the-scenes negotiations, or he tells you about a person's employment status, because a lot of CEOs are so tight-lipped about that stuff. Of course, Portnoy had his greatest hits. He made fun of Kirk, Rico, and Brandon Walker, and he hijacked the show a little bit, talking about his new dog. But overall, this is a Portnoy that we love and have appreciated over the years. He came prepared, and to me, he was the best of the trio. Kirk wasn't a ball of fire to open up the episode. I mean, he admitted he was pissed off because of the technical issues with KMS. But Kirk was a true professional, and he was able to refocus his effort on the Unnamed Podcast, and he turned in a solid performance as usual with his humor leading the way. I mean, he's absolutely funny, and it showed in this episode. The person who seemed to struggle was Whitney, because he seemed kind of boxed out this episode because the focus was on the basketball event. And Ryan not being there sort of meant that he was playing the role of the guy looking at someone else's vacation photos and hearing about his amazing experience while he was at home bored. And Whitney had such a bad timed idea about the Chicklets hockey-themed event that didn't go over well at all. It was like a fire drill during a torrential rainstorm. I mean, Portnoy just didn't understand what was going on in that moment. And Ryan usually reads the room pretty well. But in this case, I just felt like he was, saying something to try and stay relevant in the moment. And, it seems like that's going to be the case with this show. Two guys are going to dominate the conversation while the other guy tries to stay relevant. Portnoy was that guy in episode 1, and Whitney was that guy in episode 2. And this isn't an attack on the guys or an indictment of the show by any means. This is simply the fact that someone has to receive the bronze medal or be Godfather 3 each week, because there just isn't enough airtime for all three of these guys. But overall, this is a gem of a show, and a lot of us can't wait for the new episode to come out each Thursday. It's just a great show overall. Moving on to KMS, the content itself was wonderful all week. Kirk's remote shows where the Barstool people are involved are excellent and are often a welcome relief from the week in, week out KMS drama. And isn't Jeff D. Lowe one of the nicest, down-to-earth, relatable guys at Barstool? And it's great to see how he acts like one of the guys and is totally in sync with Kirk and the Minifans. I mean, you get guys like KFC, Rico, and Brandon who are just so anti-Minifan, and I don't get that. But Jeff understands that the fans are often the lifeblood of this show, and it's just too bad he can't be a blind Mike, for example, and be on the show weekly for 2 to 3 hours, because that would be a great boost. And, these guys put out great content this week while being totally overtired from the basketball event, and we cannot overlook this. I mean, these guys were ready for the morgue on Tuesday, and they still gave us a good show. I mean, they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to record that day, but they still did that. Of course, there can definitely be some of the greatest hits. I mean, they talk about their dinners a little too much, and, Kirk has overplayed the Jeff D. Lowe not paying for dinner joke a little bit too much now. He talks about it way too much, and I think he's got to tone that down. But the guys give us good content, and it's too bad because there are people on Twitter that have to be the proverbial skunk at the picnic. And I don't know why they complain. It's just, it's especially with the basketball event, it just didn't make any sense. I mean, many of us who played basketball or play basketball can say that from an athletic standpoint, this was a major accomplishment, and those involved should absolutely be excited about it. And from a content standpoint, this was another example of why Barstool is the best in the business. It was a phenomenal bit of content there. It was great. Now, did these guys cure cancer? Of course they didn't. But why shouldn't they be amped up and want to talk about what they did all week? And who are we to tell Kirk what he should talk about, what he should not talk about, and for how long? I saw that a lot this week, and it blew my mind. I mean, if Kirk wants to pull an Andy Kaufman and read The Great Gatsby on the air week in and week out, then who are we to tell him to not do that? And who are we to complain? We're not entitled to do that. But that's all that 5 to 10% of Kirk's audience wants to do. And it's funny. I play this game whenever something goes wrong with KMS. I'll throw out a number, let's say 18. And then I'll give it a time frame, let's say 4 minutes. I'll then go on to Twitter and see if at least 18 different people have tweeted what is going wrong with the show to the show account. And more often than not, the number goes well above the number I set. Because it seems like it's a mad dash to Twitter to see who can bitch first. And you have to realize, I don't think that Kirk cares if Justin's feet tells him that the audio is bad. I mean, he already gets it. But it seems like all these people want to do is let Kirk know that they know about it so that Kirk can mention their name on the air. I mean, it's totally sad. I mean, he gets it. He knows that there are issues. And I just don't understand why people feel like they have to, go on Twitter and let Kirk know about it. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And you could see that this complaining is not going over well with Kirk. He has said he is now going to scale back the show to 3 days a week going forward. And I've said this before. I think Kirk's contract only calls for 3 shows a week, and I think they can be less than 1 hour. He puts out all this content for the fans each week, and we need to appreciate this. But it seems like some people would rather bite the hand that feeds them content rather than be grateful. And all people really seem to want to do is bitch, and it's just too much. And speaking of bitching, there was a lot of it when it came to the audio issues, and certainly in this case, people were right to complain. They just went overboard. The sound quality and the technical issues were shoddy, and I think Coleman and Justin can agree to this. Of course, I'm a loyalist to both of these guys, so I'm not going to crucify them. I'm not going to do it now. I probably never will. But what these guys need to do is be more assertive. They have to stand up for themselves and tell Kirk not what he wants to hear, but what he needs to hear. Kirk is very open to listening and helping as long as people are upfront with him and honest. Just tell him the truth. The problem is that people not named Steve Robinson are always scared to death of him, and I don't get why. I mean, yes, he can be tough to deal with and stubborn at times, but that usually happens when Kirk knows that people are putting him on, are not trying, or are lazy. He just wants people to try hard, be honest, and be upfront with him. It's really simple. And they also can't be afraid to tell Kirk when he's wrong. I mean, there has been Wi-Fi issues in that studio forever. If you recall, Kirk, and I think it was Cullinane, called a Verizon guy on air once because the internet connection was poor. And I know Kirk had mentioned that there wasn't Wi-Fi issues with Steve because a majority of those episodes, if you recall, were not on YouTube or Rumble. it was old school. They recorded the show in the morning, and then the episode dropped on all the platforms in the afternoon. So, of course, Steve didn't have those issues. There was also many times where they didn't take calls. So it was a different show back then. And, to me, I'm not an expert, and it's not a knock on Coleman or Justin, but maybe an experienced tech guy or a producer from Barstool can go into the Watertown studio and help rectify the sound and quality issues that they have going on. Or maybe an influx of cash needs to be sunk into that studio to fix what's going on. I mean, Portnoy isn't afraid to spend money, so maybe, single boosters or new equipment can help fix the issue. I mean, we won't know this until Justin and Coleman work up the nerve to ask for what they need. But I'll say this. Until these issues are fixed, then I don't know why the guys at Barstool don't produce and upload the remote shows when Kirk's in New York or Chicago. And if it means no YouTube while Kirk is away, then so be it. I mean, Coleman and Justin aren't exactly Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity, so they're not being there won't be the end of the world. But what will be the proverbial end to their Barstool careers will be the audio issues. It's time for them to own up, ask for what they need, and fix it, or else Kirk is just going to move on. It will be a bad decision, but Kirk, once he gets a thought into his head, he's not going to change his mind. So these guys definitely have their jobs on the line, and I hope that they're able to rectify the problem. And in closing, and I'm going to read this from a prepared statement. Apologies go out to anyone who encountered audio issues with episode 24. I was unaware of the situation, as I do not listen to my show once it's sent for uploading. I'm given a date and time of the release and then forward it to the listeners. In fact, and this is not a bit, the only time I hear my show is if clips are played on the main show. I don't read the comments and cannot tell you if 3 people or 300 listen. And that's the God-honest truth as I try to compartmentalize TCP, KMS, and social media from my private life. Unfortunately, I've struggled with separating the two recently. To be brief, an insensitive comment made towards me by someone I muted months ago was forwarded to me by a few people. This tweet was very concerning. I will not read the tweet or divulge who wrote it, but it had me off kilter for weeks. And I'm okay with people making fun of TCP, my lisp, weight, looks, and whatnot. Hell, I agree, laugh, and understand with 99% of what is said, especially if it's above board. That stuff is fair game. I don't mind it. What I don't condone is this tweet that was considered a threat by people not on Twitter that I reviewed this with. It crossed the line and had me on the verge of a tailspin. What was said raised major concerns. Less than a dozen people know the struggles I've dealt with for years. Kirk knows just a little and mentioned as much this past week. This tweet almost triggered the inner demons I spent years keeping down. Luckily, I have a great network of people that help me stay on track. The good news is TCP will continue, and of course, I'm open to most invitations and DMs. Thanks again for checking in. It means more than you guys will ever know. I'll have TCP 26 out next week, and I'll talk to you soon.